The mysterious land of Wano, a proud country rich with culture and a natural beauty that is unmatched. Wano's closed-off borders make it tricky to visit, but with the New World Tours package, you and your family can travel to this completely safe nation. Animals will run up to you wielding lollipops. There is plenty of food to go around, and the education system is second to none. Praise be to the Shogun and Kaido, who look out for... I can't do this anymore, Eddie. I can't do it anymore. We're selling these people a bunch of lies. How many have died? Get off of me! Where are you taking me? I have finally arrived. I know you've all been patiently waiting for me since I started this journey, and I appreciate that. I'm finally here now, and it's so good to see... You all just left? Today I'm going to be talking about Act 1 of Wano, so everything leading up to Luffy getting his face absolutely caved in. If you're just joining me on this journey, I'm Denny, and this is my series where I offer my first impressions on the One Piece anime as a first-time viewer. The entrance into Wano, all the initial action and reveals were like a roller coaster with some high highs and one specific low that left a bad taste in my mouth. Without further ado, let's sail on to this long built-up country. Oh, just kidding. First, we have to check in on Cat Viper and Marco chatting it up in Whitebeard's home. We last left Cat Viper as he was off to try and convince Marco the Phoenix to join their alliance against Kaido. Well, apparently, he didn't have much trouble finding the former Whitebeard pirate who now wears glasses to show us that time has passed. This entire section was not quite what I was expecting. Nothing strategically important to the alliance seems to come from it, but we do get some more backstory on Whitebeard. He was secretly taking care of his home, a land that cannot afford the world government tax, which means it's left unprotected by the Marines. Also, it's Weevil time. According to Marco, Edward Weevil could be Whitebeard's son, since he knows for a fact Whitebeard and Weevil's mother sailed together on a ship for some time. This is such a strange ongoing plot point. I have no idea what's going to come from this Whitebeard son mystery, or why it's so important this late in the game. It honestly feels kind of Game of Thronesy, and I actually like the mystery. But I've already talked about this for way too long. Marco isn't gonna help because Weevil is coming for him and Whitebeard's home, so he needs to protect it. This was an odd way to frame the beginning of the Wano arc, because I don't believe for a second that Marco isn't going to help out. But this makes me think that the Straw Hats will be on Wano long enough for other events across the world to unfold, freeing up people to eventually arrive to help them out. None of that matters for now, because the Whole Cake Island crew is finally arriving at Wano. I have to tell you that I love the way the in-universe world begins to change into a more Edo period Japanese art style as they approach Wano, but also the animation goes from good to supreme. The way the sea changes to that traditional sea style is so goddamn cool. How smooth the takeover from the regular sea to the Wano Sea was animated was like ecstasy. Soak it in. Then there's the giant koi fish leading the Sunny up the waterfall. It all felt so good. But of course, it can't all be fun. So they get stuck in a whirlpool and separated. Guess they kinda had it coming from the last whirlpool they were just at. I really enjoyed this entire sequence. We haven't had the journey to a new location be this mysterious, fun, and chaotic in a long time. I definitely think it delivered. Then we get our first look at Wano proper, specifically the flower capital, and the setting does not disappoint. Unsurprisingly, Wano is very much inspired by Edo, Japan, which I won't pretend to be an expert on, but everything looks about how I'd expect, except with some One Piece flair. For example, that huge tree that serves as a backdrop for the palace looks real nice and just adds that extra oomph. And within the flower capital is where the Dressrosa crew have ingratiated themselves into Wano society. Frankie is working as a carpenter, Robin is a geisha, Usopp is a toad oil salesman, and Zoro is a Ronin. We don't find out why any of this is the case for some time, but this is when the new animation really became apparent. I think the overall aesthetic just looks right for this portion of the story, and it's all wonderfully colored and outlined. I don't know, I'm not an animator, so I'm just talking out my ass, but my untrained eye thinks the new style of outlining and shading adds to a real smooth look. Also, all the character models look a bit different. It's tough to tell at this point how much they've changed since they're all in disguise. Robin looks kind of weird to me, but the most obvious one is Zoro. His hair is way greener, maybe he's just going through a phase. The action is also incredible to watch. Zoro is mistaken for some serial killer, so instead of killing himself, he decides to kill everyone else. He goes nutso mode on the slasher and his men in a smooth-ass sequence that has a surprising amount of blood. There's a lot more blood in general throughout this section, which I find refreshing. And if you thought that was enough, once Zoro gets his swords, he creates a fucking tornado and completely destroys the HQ. It's safe to say that his cover has been ruined. A big theme of Act 1 is Luffy and Zoro completely ruining everything they touch and endangering the lives of their allies. So let's check in to see how Luffy manages to charge ass backwards into self-destruction. On the beach where Luffy washes up, he finds the Sunny and a giant lion dog fighting a monkey with a massive katana. Oh yeah, baby. That's Wano. The most vital development though, what seems like an incredibly crucial detail Luffy just so happens to stumble upon, is the arrival of Otama. This little girl has been captured by Kaido's beast pirates, not Animal Kingdom pirates. That sounds so much lamer. And I love the big grin Luffy gets on his face when these pirates challenge him. He's a full-blown loon who loves a good fight. I liked Otama right away. As she ran into the story, I was nervous she'd be an annoying child character, but I think she's fun and the complete opposite of whining. I really like her whole thing with taming animals and how she immediately wants to repay Luffy for his help. This also, of course, leads to the revelation that she knew Ace. 4 years ago, he came to Wano and helped out our village, and the two became close. Judging by the lack of a massive back tattoo, this appears to be a pre-Whitebeard Ace, and he kinda seems to have been Otama's Shanks. Obviously, there are differences. Like Ace promises to come back and allow Otama on his crew, where Shanks very much did the opposite to Luffy, but still, Ace is the reason that Otama wants to become a ninja. Of course, Luffy breaks the news to Otama that Ace croaked and ain't ever coming back, which really upsets her, but Luffy's the new big bro now, and she's gotta get used to it. It's sad and kind of funny that Luffy now is older than the Ace that Otama met. When she gets sick from the poisoned water, Luffy takes the responsibility of getting her treated extremely seriously. His interactions with her have really demonstrated to me just how much Luffy has grown since the start of the series. It's a bit strange seeing him more in an Ace role, but I actually really appreciated this change. Let's rewind a bit to talk about Otama's living situation. She lives with this long-nosed winged weirdo who is also a descendant of the dude who made all the legendary swords? Or at least some of them. Luffy literally steals a cursed sword on his way out of there, and based on the master's reaction, this was a very not chill thing to do. Are we finally getting some payoff with the legendary swords? Where's Tashigi? Still unclear why Otama lives with this strange man, but they both are waiting for something. What he's waiting for, I have no idea, but I'm certain it will be badass. Otama and Master, I don't remember his name and I dare not look him up out of fear of spoilers, used to live in a village that was destroyed by ex-Drake over a year ago. We knew that he was with Kaido, but I thought he'd be a nicer lad than some village destroyer. I'm still very curious about him, but we also see that Hawkins is working for Kaido too. What the hell? Wasn't he making an alliance with Kid originally? Was he a mole, or was he faced with a join me or suffer situation? Seems to be pretty well integrated into the organization if he's only been with Kaido for a short time. Anyway, as Luffy charges forward looking for a doctor to treat Otama, he stumbles upon a Ronin looking for booze in the wasteland. Luffy and Zoro together, this is when things really begin to fall apart. But first, I need to say something. I am already loving the setting of Wano because of how diverse it is. From the jump, we have seen multiple locations that are completely different from each other. I also really like the strong focus on Kaido's destruction of the natural world, with all his industrial factories polluting the land and emitting smoke across the skyline. It creates a constant sense that Kaido's influence is all-encompassing and violent. Very scouring of the Shire of Oda, and I love that kind of stuff. So Zoro and Luffy are confronted by Hawkins, which means that almost immediately after landing, Luffy has exposed himself to Kaido's forces, which is no surprise. and we get ourselves a fight. Luffy decides to fight with the sword he stole, despite Zoro wanting to take a look at it. Please give the sword to Zoro, you little monkey. I'm glad he isn't actually good with the sword and just punches people while holding it. I would have been pretty peeved if he was just a good or even decent swordsman. Anyway, Hawkins is an interesting character. We find out he's got these straw powers, but really, his power set seems to be based on some weird tarot card magic, which is odd to me. Everything he's capable of, like predicting the future, can't just come from his fruit, right? But I also doubt he's just flat out magic. Well, either way, they escape from Hawkins, but this is the first domino to collapse, leading to the ruination of everyone's well-laid plan. The gang heads to a local village, Okobore Town, with the help of Otsuru, a woman Zoro rescued before meeting up with Luffy, who I entirely forgot about until she makes her hitchhiking ass known on the Lion Dog. She runs a tea shop, but is also good with herbs and gets Otama's illness under control. The story continues to flesh out Wano with this town by describing it as essentially a place where the workers live off scraps from the nearby Magistrates Town. This series is very much obsessed with the idea of leftovers. The Great Terminal in the Goa Kingdom is not much different. If the polluted water and lack of food weren't enough to get you to understand the plight of the people of this nation, I'd say Okobore Town just about beats you over the head that things are very much not chill and need to change. Good thing we've got a rubber idiot on the case. Law, you've gotta help us. Oh, that's right, baby. Trafalgar Law is back. Pretty much dragged from comfort back into the story, only to be victimized by the stupidity of a pirate group he seems bonded to by fate. But hey, at least he's rocking a sick new style. Got his Jolly Roger custom branded on his kimono, huh? You're really not trying to hide, are you? I take it back. He's an idiot too. But I'll talk about Law in a bit. For now, let's check in on Skeletor. So I actually burst out laughing when I first saw Kaido's cartoonish HQ lit up in all red. So on the nose evil, I actually really fucking like it. It's as blatant an evil base as the Legion of Dooms or Skeletor's HQ, and I respect that he's just going for it. You don't see that a lot these days. He's evil, and he's gonna flaunt it. Essentially, Kaido just knows Luffy's in Wano and is grumbling while drinking. Nothing too exciting. Back at Okobore Town, Zoro really takes center stage during this section. He tells a sumo wrestler who is harassing Otsuru's friend Okiku to go pound sand. He gets all the major dialogue with the ladies, and when shit hits the fan, he's the one who is saving everyone's asses. Luffy is around, but he's definitely taking a backseat as he is caring for Otama, which I actually enjoyed. It's been a long time since we've seen Zoro do his thing, and these moments just add to Luffy's new older brother status. The little girl is okay, and she gets to eat the most basic of all foods for the first time, which makes her so happy and appreciative of this day, her birthday. Aww. But then Batman shows up and ruins everything. Oh, sorry, Batman and his gazelle sidekick. These are the first smile fruit users we've seen, which are called gifters, and their power sets are pretty fun. They don't seem to be too OP, but definitely compared to normal folk, they are monsters. The Gazelle Man runs in and takes Otama, and this is when the story begins suffering from some issues, in my humble opinion. It seemed like pretty contrived writing to have Otama be in danger again, and have Luffy go to save her again. Yes, there's a difference between being kidnapped and being sick. Trust me, I know. But there was literally zero time between solving one of Otama's problems and a new one beginning. So Luffy, Zoro, and Okiku chase after Otama toward Bakura Town, the Magistrates Town. Okiku is a particularly large woman who we find out is a samurai when she volunteers to help. I wondered why she was hiding it, and my first thought was she was staking out the Magistrates Town, but the mystery around Okiku does stretch on for quite some time. Meanwhile, we see the man in charge of Bakura Town, Hold'em, one of Kaido's headliners, and another smile fruit eater. Hold'em is an interesting case. He's a man with a lion in his stomach, and they both hate each other. This has to be a side effect of the smile, right? If that's the case, that opens the question, can the smile fruit create sentient life, or did this lion already exist beforehand? If the smile can create sentient life, that's a pretty big deal, but no one seems to care because it's sumo time. This sumo situation is where the arc really started to test my patience, and if I don't air my grievances, I'll implode. So firstly, Kiku stops Luffy from making a scene when they enter Bakura Town because they don't want to alert Hold'em. Remember that, because it will be important later. So in order to smoke out the leader and find out where Otama is, Luffy and Zoro cause a scene at the sumo match where the wrestler obsessed with Kiku is showing off his stuff. Remember way back when Kiku warned everyone not to make a scene? Despite how long it's been since then, I figured she would have remembered her own words. Well, the mandatory Japanese setting sumo match is on, and this was so frustrating to watch. The situation becomes far worse when Okiku is dragged into the ring and embarrasses Sumo Lardo. The pacing for this arc hasn't been terrible. There have been some lulls, but generally it's been pretty good. That comes to a screeching halt once Luffy steps into the ring, and we have to watch it all play out in excruciating detail, which I wouldn't have minded if it was at all interesting. Luffy versus Sumo Lardo is painful to watch. The fight reuses the same animations over and over again. There is one sequence of the two trying to balance that goes on for so long that I thought my TV had broken. I'd have a hard time finding a more padded out section of this anime, and that's saying something. The whole thing just left a bad taste in my mouth because it directly contradicts the momentum of the story. Remember that they're here to save Otama? Later on, Luffy gets pissed when he sees Otama was tortured, but hey, you could have stopped that way quicker if you didn't waste so much time. It does undercut the big brother action that Luffy has undertaken up to this point. Law, stop these boys. Oh, Beppo has a tummy ache. Okay, take your time, I guess. Luffy sends Sumo Lardo flying into Hold'em's house, and if you thought the padding was stopping, you'd be wrong. Watching episode 904 was one of the worst experiences I had watching this series. It all felt like padding, with Luffy just screaming for Hold'em the majority of the time, mispronouncing his name in perhaps the laziest version of that running gag to date. Then, when he arrives, they just stare at each other for another 3 minutes. Interspliced, there are shots of Hawkins on his way, Law on his way, and the introduction of Speed, but it felt like there was enough content for maybe 4 minutes, which was stretched to 5 times that amount. I hate making these criticisms, but it just felt like the entire story was suddenly covered in molasses. I think it was the perfect storm of bad pacing and bad story direction. Like, yes, the padding here is horrible, but even the story itself, saving Tama twice back to back, Law being introduced just to take care of Beppo's tummy ache, like what the hell are we doing? After the arc had just gotten going, just got me invested, it hits the brakes hard. Things do begin to pick up again, but I was thoroughly disappointed by Bakura Town. Luffy rescues Otama from Hold'em without hurting him, while Zoro hijacks the food cart from Speed's men. The plan is to not wreck Hold'em, because if they do that, for some reason, that will automatically trigger a response from Jack. Yes, thick boy Jack, as if what they've done already hasn't been enough. But when Luffy sees that Otama's cute little cheeks have been tortured, he rightfully smacks Hold'em with a red hawk, solidifying to Otama that Luffy is just like Ace, despite not knowing they're brothers yet. Now, let's focus in on Otama's ability for a second. The reason she was tortured, the show really has a thing for child torture, doesn't it? Interestingly enough, this section of Wano has a decent amount of overlap with the post-war arc. If we're sticking to everything being an echo of past arcs, maybe Wano is the Summit War Saga out of order? Completely lost track of what I was saying. Otama's ability is extremely valuable for this specific arc because the majority of enemies are all beast people. She's honestly like an in-game cheat code, so I hope she's used cleverly because her power risks overwhelming the story. She uses her little cheek ball to bring Speed under her control, and I found that to be pretty entertaining. I wonder how many other beast pirates she'll control by the end, and if that control ever wears off. Law has finally arrived. Just in time too, dude. Nothing's going wrong in this town that you need to worry about. Instead of stopping the clowns he's forced to be around, Law decides it's time to murder Hawkins. The way Law walks out with that basket helmet thing to hide his identity was so slick and badass. Oh right, his Jolly Roger is literally right on his chest in 2 places. Come on, man. Don't let the Straw Hats rub off on you. So this plan falls apart because Law can't beat Hawkins, is easily identified by Hawkins, and then escapes on the massive food cart driven by Zoro that barrels toward them. I feel awful for Law, constantly having to deal with the Straw Hats messing everything up, but I'm starting to think he needs to take some responsibility for himself. completely whiffed the whole Hawkins thing big time. Goodbye, Bakura Town, the town of massive mistakes. I do think that bringing the food and water to Okobore Town was a really nice moment. Although everything leading up to it flew off the rails, the overall purpose of this section of the story since setting off with Otama has been to endear Luffy to the people of Wano, and in that regard, this was a success. They won the hearts of the people, completely ruined everything else in the process, and now they're heading for Odin Castle. Meanwhile, we finally cut from the idiot duo and see a bit more of the country, learn a bit more of its history. This isn't new to the series, but I'm not sure it's ever been as blatant as it is here. I love how Oda crafts societal understanding of history, and how it's typically the truth just from the person in power's perspective, or, you know, a little fudging of the details. We see children being taught by some freaky snake lady the recent history of Wano, which led to the rise of the shogun Orochi, which is clearly some state-approved propaganda version of events, but the most upsetting part to me is how bought in the children are to this story. They think Orochi is radical, really cool, and mega sexy. They also hate the Kazuki clan. Luffy may be able to win some hearts and minds through his good deeds, but if the population has been raised on this propaganda for 20 years, finding allies for the Kazuki clan might prove to be pretty difficult. We also hear napping whoever's account of events about the final day of Odin's life, as well as Odin's wife's last words, which were essentially a prophecy. When I first heard this, I thought what she had to say was interesting, but how Orochi interpreted them is far more important. He's scared. After hearing all this history, and the fact that it went down 20 years ago, that had me a bit confused. I thought it lent credence to my theory from Zoe that Momo is actually far older than he appears. I assumed everyone somehow faked their own deaths 20 years ago, especially when Law takes Luffy to the tombstones outside the castle. But I couldn't for the life of me piece together what everyone was actually up to for the last 20 years. After Zoro goes to fight a tiger that looks just like him, and the Whole Cake Island crew finally enters the story again, we meet up with Kinemon and Momo. Turns out Okiku is part of their squad, and they're time travelers! Oh my god! Kinemon sits everyone down and drops the absolute bombshell that they're from the past. 20 years in the past to be exact, and I was never expecting time travel to pop up in One Piece. I'm honestly not sure if I like that it did. I guess it makes sense with the time fruit, but I'm still thinking on it. Time travel can be a death knell for long-running series like this. I've seen it implemented a number of times, and there are usually unanticipated consequences that pop up. I'm nervous, but also I have faith, and this was an exciting development. So far, so good. So Kinemon takes us to Flashback City, and I thought this was it. I thought we were gonna get all the juicy backstory that's long been built up. Odin, Roger, Whitebeard, how Kaido got involved. I was pumped. But really, it's just a story about how Odin kicked the nation's ass into loving him, then got killed off screen. This backstory really serves as a way to explain how Kinemon and crew got blasted to the future, and it doesn't do much else. We don't even see this flashback from Kinemon's perspective until the final conversation with Odin's wife, Toki. It was all really just a bird's eye overview of events that raises far more questions than it answers. Which is fine, I'm not going anywhere until I get those answers. I was just hoping for a little bit more. Let's talk about the two ladies from the past for a second. Toki is obviously instantly one of the most important characters in the series. Depending on how things pan out, maybe the most important. From the brief interaction Kinemon has with her, it's clear that she has been traveling across time for God knows how long to get to Wano, to be by Odin's side at this specific time. The big question is, why? She also mentions the Dawn. Is her plan to bring about this dawn? Is the dawn the destruction of the world government? That's what I thought, but now I'm not so sure. In theory, she could have originated before its founding. She could even know what happened during the Void Century. If she was in contact with Roger's crew, is this how they uncovered the true history of this world and got the concept of the dawn? Honestly, that'd be a little disappointing because they wouldn't have uncovered anything for themselves and just got told it by a random lady they met. So we'll see what happens there. Finally, the most glaring question is why did Toki only send Momo into the future and not her daughter as well? Pretty fucked up. so there has to be some good reason. And that leads me to the mysterious 5th person that traveled with Kinemon, Momo, Raizo, and Kanjuro. It has to be Okiku, right? We know she's part of their squad from the old days, and the color scheme of the mystery person looks very similar to her style. But why hide it? And why does it seem like that person is a man? This isn't gonna be a Crocomom situation, is it? Also, we find out that Otsuru is Kinemon's wife. Kinemon and Okiku worked together for a number of years. Presumably, Otsuru would know Okiku, so why doesn't she recognize her? Was Kiku a man or not? There are already too many mysteries. At least we get some answers. Some structure to this madness. Kinemon lays out the current plan. They're going to raid Kaido's cartoon base during the Fire Festival in 2 weeks, when all the officials visit there. In the meantime, they need to assemble their forces by finding their samurai allies from the past and rallying the people to the Kazuki cause. That's why the other Straw Hats are all undercover. It's all part of a two-pronged effort to both gather intel as well as secretly disperse information. Usopp being a secret messenger in the streets is honestly so badass. Kinemon gives the rest of the crew their assignments, and they're all kinda bullshit. Like, Sanji's makes sense, but everyone else was just bleh. Now it's time for everything to come crumbling down. There's been a ticking time bomb since Luffy started causing trouble, and oh boy, turns out it's a nuke. After being talked about for a little while now, Jack finally arrives in Okobore Town, just as it's being raided by one of Odin's former vassals, Ashura Doji, and his gang of thieves. Surprisingly, Ashura puts up more than a fight, getting in some serious hits on Jack, and it seems like he has the edge the entire time. Jack really just exists to get fucked up, huh? Considering how Ashura is someone Kinemon explicitly wants to recruit, and we're lied to that he's the strongest man in the world, it's good to see that he actually brings some power to the cause. Although, morally, I'd say he needs a bit more work. We finally cut over to the Legion of Doom and see Kaido again. At first, I thought this was a really weird scene. Kaido is just moping around drinking, then the big baby screams that he hates living, turns into a dragon, and flies into the sky. What a turn of events. I guess Kaido is a dragon man, which fits with his King of the Beast persona, and I thought that was that. We cut back to the events in Okobore Town and Odin Castle, where things continue to progress as they were before. But then, Oda makes a brilliant decision that sends everyone's plans into a tailspin. Kaido is here. Everyone sees his massive dragon form and are rightfully stunned. The way that he emerges from that giant black cloud in the sky is terrifying. At one point, I believe someone says the people of Wano think of Kaido as a god, and I can see why. What else would you call something like this? There was also an interesting tidbit where Kinemon has to explain Momo's own dragon transformation to Okiku, and he refers to a dragon as a hateful thing. What's the deal with dragons in this series? Obviously, there are these actual dragon men, but let's not forget about this dragon man. Does Kinemon just hate dragons because of Kaido, or is there more to it? I guess we'll have to wait and see, but somehow I want to see some dragon v dragon action. Momo, buddy, baby, go get him! Maybe hold on a sec, Momo. Kaido is looking to destroy Law and Luffy because they both openly gave themselves away, and Hawkins decided to redirect Kaido's drunk ass from the population. Kaido kinda seems to have no respect from his men. Sure, everyone fears him, but they also know he's this giant drunk asshole who's gonna make everything worse. Jack is afraid how Kaido will screw things up. Hawkins just straight up lies to Kaido, which Jack accepts as necessary. Maybe I'm just picking up on something that won't really matter, but if Kaido's whole thing is he's this miserable, unkillable, giant drunk baby who everyone fears but no one respects, that could be a really interesting take on the new villain. It also perfectly slots into a fresh foil role for Luffy. Anyway, this was a great show of Kaido's power that also acts as a fake-out reason to get Luffy furious since he thinks his friends fried. Holy shit, dude. That punch was a massive mistake, but was so goddamn cool. The animation during this entire sequence is supreme. The sheer power on display, it's all so glorious. I also wasn't expecting Luffy to actually be able to impact Kaido as much as he did here. Then, back on the ground, we see that speed fell from Kaido's body, and my first thought was, Tama's been captured again? Don't worry though. The story decides to mix things up by providing a fake-out death for Tama instead. Show me all the bloody hands next to apples on the floor that you want. I know you ain't killing a kid off screen. But seriously, I'm not super crazy about how Tama exists only to be a motivating force for Luffy. It's been overused already, and we're not even a quarter through the arc. Luffy's so pissed, he goes after Kaido some more, and really lays into him to the absolute surprise of Law, Kaido's men, and me. He takes things so far as to knock Kaido's ass back into human form. So, things are going great, and this arc will be wrapping up any minute now, right? Wait, Kaido's just taking every blow Luffy throws at him. He's drunk as hell, bumbling around, and just taking fourth gear blows? He doesn't appear to be damaged at all. Oh, what the hell? How are they gonna beat this guy? The story tricked me into thinking Luffy was actually doing well, but at worst, he's just pushing Kaido around. The man takes no damage. I will say though, that if Law just jumped in here and began slicing Kaido up, and I don't see any reason why he couldn't, this would legit be over. Law, don't you start being a dummy too. I'm worried about you, bud. Well, Kaido hits Luffy with a brutal one-shot, resulting in an instant KO. Holy shit. Law has to retreat without Luffy due to Hawkins interfering with a Sea Prism Stone nail, which of course he tells us originated in Wano, because it's clearly the most important place in the world. So, with everyone presumed dead, Luffy captured, Law on the run, and Zoro taking a riverboat cruise, I'd say things turned out pretty good. Of course, no one actually died, because this mature lady ninja saved everyone using her ripe fruit to create a sinkhole. Real quick, the mature woman feeling sexy gag hasn't landed for me yet, but you'll be the first to know if it ever does. Meanwhile, Dogstorm comes upon an unconscious Otama, who somehow survived Kaido's attack because, no shit. Turns out everyone is doing pretty okay. Well, everyone except for Luffy, who kinda had it coming. Seeing him dragged along the ground by Kaido's men was such an upsetting visual, although I did wish he looked a bit more messed up. He somehow looked worse after Sanji thrashed him. However, once Luffy is taken to Kaido's labor prison with all the bandages on his head, he looked way more broken, and I think it's visually perfect. Honestly, I'm glad Luffy is being put in this prison. He needs to be taken out of the action for a while so everyone can get their shit done. This is also the ultimate evolution of a trope that's been around since the beginning. Luffy being stuck so everyone else has time to do their own thing. This time around though, he's stuck in a big enough space that he still has agency and can interact with other characters. There's some fish-eating weirdo locked up here, and of course, Luffy ends up in the same cell as Eustace Kid. Kind of a weird thing to do, but totally awesome. And with that, Act 1 ends. Overall, Act 1 of Wano was way more insane than I expected. I didn't think it would end with Kaido flying in to obliterate Luffy. I didn't expect the Kazuki vassals to be time travelers, and I didn't expect the animation to look this damn good. Sure, there were some weak spots, but this is only the beginning of the story, and it succeeded at its job. I want to see more, I'm desperate to see more, and see more I will! How does Luffy get out of prison? What do the Straw Hats do in the meantime? Where's Big Mom? And will Law's brain be okay? I'm gonna have to keep watching to find out. Thank you so much for watching this, and special thank you to my patrons who make this all possible. They're the kind of cool people who drink Red Bull and skydive out of space. If you want to join them, check out patreon.com/shutupdenny. I've got a lot more Wano to go, so I've got a boogie. My next video on Wano Act 2 will be out in 2 weeks, so until then, I'll shut up. Where am I?